Have you ever settled into the comfortable illusion that history is a neat, tidy timeline? First came the dinosaurs, then the cavemen, followed by the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, and so on. That linear progression is the most pervasive, yet most flawed concept we carry about the past. The actual timeline of our world is far messier, more bizarre, and more interconnected than any textbook lets on. It is a swirling, chaotic vortex where different eras unexpectedly crash into one another. Today, we're diving into 10 facts so utterly strange they shattered that neat historical framework. You'll swear these temporal collisions are products of pure fiction, but every single one is completely and verifiably true. Get ready to dismantle the historical narrative in your mind and replace it with something far more fascinating. We begin our journey by examining the largest gaps and most shocking overlaps in human and geological history, proving that the ancient world was not neatly separated from the Ice Age nor the Classical era from the age of consumer technology. Number 1. Pyramids and woolly mammoths, the persistence of the Ice Age. Picture the Great Pyramid of Giza, a monumental marvel of human engineering, rising sharply from the Egyptian sands. The precision, the scale, the sheer organization required to achieve this feat, it is the epitome of high ancient civilization. Now, in stark contrast, picture a woolly mammoth, that shaggy giant of the Ice Age. You'd assume they were separated by an impassable gulf of geological time, right? The Ice Age ended, civilization began. Wrong. The Great Pyramid of Khufu was painstakingly built around 2580 BCE. This date marks the height of the Old Kingdom, a time of meticulous record-keeping, sophisticated bureaucracy, and monumental architecture. Yet simultaneously, a small, isolated population of woolly mammoths was still very much alive and thriving on Wrangel Island in the Arctic Ocean. These mammoths, separated from the larger mainland populations, survived due to unique ecological circumstances, a pocket of time that defied the global extinction event. The last mammoths on Wrangel Island did not disappear until around 1650 BCE, possibly due to overhunting by small groups of settlers, or, more likely, a localized ecological crisis caused by limited genetic diversity and environmental changes on the isolated island. This means the mammoths coexisted with the pyramid builders for nearly 1,000 years. The historical implication: this temporal overlap forces a radical revision of how we categorize ancient history. The era of pharaohs, papyrus, and advanced mathematics, the very definition of the Bronze Age, was also an era of Ice Age megafauna. The world in 2000 BCE was not a world completely purged of its prehistoric inhabitants. It was a chaotic mosaic where civilization was established in the Nile Valley, while true prehistoric life still held on at the ecological fringes of the Arctic Ocean. The sheer cognitive dissonance of this coexistence, pharaohs and living mammoths, proves that the ancient world was a far wilder, less defined place than we dare to imagine. Number 2. Cleopatra, closer to the iPhone than to the pyramids. Speaking of ancient Egypt, let's turn our attention to its most famous queen, Cleopatra VII Philopator. She is the quintessential figure of the ancient world. We place her at the pinnacle of classical antiquity, her life defined by the vast structures of Egypt and the power plays of Roman legions. She seems inseparable from the millennia-old history of the Nile Valley. The shatteringly simple truth is that Cleopatra is practically a contemporary figure. Cleopatra was born in 69 BCE. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, as established, was built around 2580 BCE. This means that by the time Cleopatra was born, the Great Pyramid was already over 2,500 years old. To Cleopatra, the pyramids were ancient relics from a distant, almost mythical past, structures that had stood longer by her time than they have stood by ours. Now consider the leap forward, the time that elapsed between her death in 30 BCE and the moment Steve Jobs unveiled the first iPhone in 2007 is less than 2,037 years. This fact radically compresses the timeline. It reveals that the entire history of the Common Era, the rise and fall of global empires, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, and the entire digital age, is a shorter span of time than the one separating Cleopatra from the structures she is most often photographed beside. She was the final ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek line of monarchs who viewed themselves as the inheritors of a culture already thousands of years in the making. In the grand, dizzying sweep of history, she is startlingly close to us, proving that certain eras, like the entirety of the Hellenistic and Roman period, are compacted together in ways that defy our intuition. Number 4. Samurai and the telephone, the simultaneous endings. Now we leap across continents, moving from the Mediterranean to the isolated island nation of Japan. Think of the samurai, the honorable warriors, the rigid feudal society, the code of Bushido, and the flash of the katana. Their era feels like it belongs to a distant medieval past, a world completely untouched by industrial modernity. But the age of the samurai ended much, much later than most people realize. The last major samurai battle, the Satsuma Rebellion, led by the legendary Saigo Takamori, was fiercely fought and lost in 1877. This wasn't a medieval skirmish. It was a final, desperate stand against the modernizing forces of the Meiji government, equipped with Western-style uniforms, artillery, and advanced firearms. Now look across the globe. That same year, in 1877, was a pivotal year for global technology. It was the year that Alexander Graham Bell was granted the key, final patent for the telephone. It was the year the first commercial telephone lines were established, beginning the global age of instant communication. Imagine that split-screen view. In one frame, a samurai, perhaps dressed in traditional armor, is charging uphill into a fusillade of modern bullets in Kumamoto or Kagoshima, upholding a centuries-old code. In the other, a man in a Victorian office speaks into a strange device, his voice traveling through a wire for the very first time. This collision of 1877 perfectly illustrates the uneven pace of global development. The final spectacular gasp of feudalism and the birth of instantaneous global connectivity occurred simultaneously. The world was already being wired together with copper before the last professional warrior class, defined by honor and the sword, was wiped out. It shows that the forces of deep tradition and radical technology were not separated by centuries, but were breathing the same air at the exact same moment. These facts continued to compress history in unexpected ways, showing how long certain institutions have endured, how physically unstable our monuments are, and how recently barbaric execution methods persisted. Number 4. Oxford versus the Aztecs, the ancient education. Let's talk about education. Oxford University is synonymous with academic excellence and centuries of tradition. Teaching was already formally documented at Oxford as early as 1096 CE. Its existence is so foundational to Western history that it seems eternal. Now consider the Aztec Empire, the mighty Mesoamerican civilization that built the grand floating city of Tenochtitlan on Lake Texcoco. The Aztec civilization wasn't founded until 1325 CE. The historical implication. This astonishing comparison reveals that Oxford University is over 229 years older than the entire Aztec civilization. While European scholars were already debating complex philosophy in candlelit halls, building up centuries of institutional knowledge in England, the civilization that would later construct breathtaking monumental pyramids in the middle of a lake had not even begun its rise to power. It underlines the extraordinary endurance of educational institutions and the vastly different starting points of simultaneous human civilizations across the globe. Number 5. The growing Eiffel Tower. Thermal instability. From ancient learning to modern engineering, let's look at the Eiffel Tower. It is the rigid, iron-latticed symbol of Paris, a structure that appears utterly stable and permanent. But the Eiffel Tower is a monument to physical instability. Thanks to a phenomenon called thermal expansion, the Eiffel Tower actually grows in the summer heat. The colossal iron
structure expands when temperatures rise, causing the tower to stretch upwards by as much as 15 centimeters, or about 6 inches. Then, as it cools down in the winter, it shrinks back to its original height. This constant process is a subtle yet relentless reminder that even the most rigid-looking man-made structures are subject to the fundamental laws of physics and are constantly moving, expanding, and contracting with the rhythm of the seasons. The iconic landmark you see on a hot August day is literally taller than the one you'd see in the cool middle of January.
Number 6. Star Wars and the Guillotine. The recent end of terror. The guillotine is the infamous chilling symbol of the French Revolution's reign of terror. We firmly associate it with the 18th century, a time of political upheaval and public bloody execution. It is the epitome of the archaic, dramatic public death. But the use of the guillotine persisted far longer than almost anyone realizes. France continued to use the guillotine as its standard method of execution for serious crimes until 1977. The last person executed by guillotine was Hamida Djandoubi in Marseille on September 10, 1977. This occurred during the presidency of Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, in a period of advanced industrialization and mass media. Let that truly sink in. The very same year that audiences were flocking to theaters to watch Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader battle with lightsabers in the first Star Wars movie, released in May 1977, a state execution by beheading was carried out in a major European nation. It's a shocking temporal overlap of the most brutal archaic form of state punishment and the genesis of the modern science fiction blockbuster age. The long, slow trajectory toward modern human rights and abolition of capital punishment was far from complete even in the very recent past. These facts explore how surprisingly advanced the ancient world was and how, conversely, some forms of life have simply endured through the most tumultuous periods of human history. Number 7. The Roman vending machine. Coin-operated antiquity. When we think of modern convenience, we think of the coin-operated machine, the simple mechanism of exchanging currency for a standardized product. This seems like a perfectly modern mass consumer invention. Yet the concept of the vending machine dates back 2,000 years to ancient Roman Egypt. In the 1st century CE, the brilliant Greek engineer and inventor, Hero of Alexandria, created a device for use in temples that would dispense holy water. When a user inserted a coin, likely a brass drachma, the weight of the coin would tip a lever, opening a valve that let a set amount of water flow out. Once the coin slid off the lever, the valve would close, stopping the flow. It was a simple, ingenious hydraulic mechanism, the world's first true coin-operated machine, designed to prevent people from taking more than their fair share of the consecrated liquid. This proves that complex, user interface technology wasn't merely a product of the Industrial Revolution, but a legacy of forgotten ancient genius. Number 8. King Tut and the Aleutian Mammoths, the Bronze Age Ice Age. We established that mammoths coexisted with the early pyramid builders, but their story gets even more chronologically challenging. The final, isolated populations of mammoths did not all disappear at once. On the Aleutian Islands off the coast of Alaska, a group of woolly mammoths were trapped and buried in ash due to a volcanic eruption around 3,600 years ago. This date places their demise around 1600 BCE. This extinction event occurred deep in the Bronze Age. This means that these specific mammoths were still alive around the time King Tutankhamun was ruling Egypt, 1332 to 1323 BCE. Their reigns tell a powerful, chilling story. The world where Ice Age giants were still walking the earth was the exact same world where complex human civilizations were forging bronze, establishing elaborate trading networks, and creating the earliest forms of literature across the Mediterranean and Middle East. Number 9. The World War I Knight, the Anachronism in the Trenches. The image of a knight in shining armor is the ultimate symbol of the Middle Ages, a time of chivalry, castles, and personalized combat. It stands in direct opposition to the mechanized slaughter of the 20th century. But yet, a figure often described as the last knight fought and survived World War I. His name was Lieutenant General Sir Adrian Carton de Wyatt, a British officer of Belgian descent. Though not wearing medieval plate armor, de Wyatt was an astonishing anachronism in the trenches. He was a man who lived by a code of intense, personalized, reckless aggression. He lost an eye and a hand in combat, was shot in the head, stomach, ankle, leg, and ear, and simply refused to retreat or surrender. His men saw him as a figure of legend, a warrior whose philosophy belonged entirely to a bygone era, fighting in an industrial meat grinder that was brutally redefining war itself. The image of a man driven by such medieval ferocity amidst the gas, barbed wire, and machine guns of World War I serves as a haunting testament to how rapidly and savagely the world had changed around the enduring human spirit of battle. These facts explore the tragedy of lost knowledge and the miraculous longevity of individuals and ancient technology. Number 10. The Slow Death of Alexandria, the Library's 1,000 Cuts. The Library of Alexandria. Its destruction is widely lamented as one of the greatest single losses of knowledge in all human history. We picture a single spectacular act of vandalism, a great fire consuming all the scrolls of the ancient world in a cinematic blaze. The reality is far more complex and, in a way, far more tragic. The library's decline was not a single catastrophic event, but a long, slow series of destructive events that stretched over centuries. From fires accidentally set by Julius Caesar's troops in 48 BCE during his civil war, to long periods of neglect and underfunding by subsequent rulers, to purges by later religious or political factions, the massive collection of knowledge slowly faded away. The true tragedy wasn't a sudden blaze, but the gradual, indifferent decay. It was a long, slow death by 1,000 cuts over hundreds of years, where the knowledge didn't vanish overnight, but was simply allowed to crumble into dust, piece by piece, an enduring lesson in the fragility of institutional memory.